The sun hung merciless in the bleached sky, beating down on the makeshift platform erected in the dusty main street of Copper Creek. The town, if it could be called that, was little more than a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the endless expanse of desert. Dust devils danced between the saloon and the general store, and the air tasted of alkali and desperation. Sarah McKenna stood on the auction block, her wrists bound with rough hemp rope that had already rubbed her skin raw. Her auburn hair, once carefully pinned, now hung in tangled strands around her face. The calico dress she'd worn when they'd taken her 3 days ago was torn at the shoulder, revealing sun-reddened skin beneath. She kept her chin raised, green eyes blazing with a defiance that 3 days of captivity hadn't managed to extinguish. The auctioneer, a greasy man named Josiah Crenshaw, circled her like a vulture eyeing carrion. His voice carried across the gathered crowd of prospectors, cowboys, and drifters who'd come to see what manner of entertainment the afternoon might provide. "Gentlemen, what we have here is prime stock young widow, strong back, knows her way around a household, can cook, clean, and she's got all her teeth." Crenshaw grabbed Sarah's jaw, forcing her mouth open to display this last attribute. She jerked away, earning herself a sharp cuff to the side of the head. The crowd remained largely silent. Times were hard in the territories, and most men could barely feed themselves, let alone take on another mouth. A few interested parties lurked at the edges, men whose eyes held a darkness that made Sarah's stomach turn to ice. "Come now, surely someone needs a woman's touch around their claim starting bid is $50. Silence stretched like a taut wire. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what happened to women nobody wanted to buy. They ended up in the cribs behind the saloons, or worse, in unmarked graves out in the sage. $40. A fat man in a stained vest stepped forward, leering. "I'll give you 25, but I want to inspect the merchandise first." Crenshaw's face split into an oily grin. "Of course, Mr. Hutchins. Step right up." As Hutchins lumbered toward the platform, his intentions written clearly on his flushed face, a voice cut through the afternoon heat like a blade. "I'll take her." Every head turned toward the speaker. He stood at the back of the crowd, a tall figure dressed in black despite the heat. A wide-brimmed hat cast shadows across his face, but what could be seen was weathered by sun and wind into the color of old leather. Dark eyes surveyed the scene with an intensity that made several men step aside as he moved forward. "Well now," Crenshaw stammered, caught off guard. "The bid stands at 25. The stranger reached into his coat and withdrew a leather pouch. He tossed it onto the platform where it landed with a heavy metallic thud. $100 gold. A murmur rippled through the crowd. That was more money than most of them would see in 6 months of honest work. Hutchins' face purpled. "Now wait just a minute." The stranger's hand moved to rest on the ivory handle of the Colt at his hip. The gesture was casual, almost lazy, but Hutchins stepped back as if he'd been struck. "Sold?" Crenshaw snatched up the pouch, not bothering to count its contents. "To the gentleman in black." The stranger climbed onto the platform with an easy grace that spoke of a life spent in the saddle. Up close, Sarah could see the lines etched deep around his eyes, the gray threading through dark hair at his temples. His face was hard, carved from stone and silence, but when he looked at her, something flickered in those dark eyes. Not kindness exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin. He drew a knife from his boot and cut her bonds with one swift motion. Sarah's hands fell to her sides, numb and useless from hours of constriction. "Can you ride?" His voice was low, gravelly, as if he didn't use it often. Sarah nodded, not trusting her own voice. "Good." He turned to Crenshaw. "Her boy. Where is he?" Sarah's heart leapt. "Henry, you know about Henry." Crenshaw's rat-like eyes darted nervously. "The boy, well now. That's a separate transaction entirely." The stranger's hand returned to his gun. This time, he drew it halfway from its holster. "The boy comes with her. Or you can explain to these good folks how you came to have a bullet in your skull."
"In the stable," Crenshaw squeaked. "Tack room in the stable."
The stranger holstered his weapon and offered Sarah his arm. She took it, legs trembling as they descended from the platform. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea before Moses. They found Henry locked in the tack room, curled up on a pile of old horse blankets. The 8-year-old launched himself at his mother, burying his face in her skirts. "Mama, I was so scared they said they were going to sell you to bad men." Sarah dropped to her knees, gathering him close.
"Shh, sweetheart, we're all right now."
She looked up at their mysterious benefactor.
"Thank you. I don't even know your name."
"Jake Morrison," he said, already moving to saddle horses. "And don't thank me yet. Those men who took you, they'll come looking once they realize you're gone." Sarah's blood ran cold.
"You know about them, about what they did to my husband?"
Jake's hands stilled on the saddle cinch.
"I know enough.
No, they killed William McKenna for the papers he was carrying. No, they've been turning over every rock in 3 counties looking for you and the boy." He turned to face her. "Question is, do you still have what they're after?" Sarah hesitated, then reached into the hidden pocket she'd sewn into her corset. The oilcloth packet was damp with sweat but intact. "Evidence of a land scheme. My William was going to take it to the federal marshal in Tucson." Jake's expression didn't change, but something in the set of his shoulders shifted. "Then we'd best ride hard. They'll have men watching all the roads to Tucson." As they led the horses from the stable, Sarah caught his arm.
"Why are you helping us? You don't know us."
For the first time, Jake Morrison almost smiled. It was a bitter thing, more grimace than grin. "Let's say I've got my own debts to settle with the men who killed your husband. Your evidence might be just what I need to see them hang." They mounted up, Henry riding in front of his mother on a steady mare, as they turned their horses toward the setting sun and the vast emptiness of Apache country beyond. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she'd traded one form of captivity for another. Jake Morrison was no savior. He was a man with his own agenda, and she and Henry were simply useful to him. But as Copper Creek fell away behind them and the desert opened up ahead, she decided that was enough. For now, they were alive and free. Tomorrow could worry about itself. The red rocks of the desert seemed to glow like coals in the dying light as they rode toward an uncertain future. 3 unlikely companions bound together by circumstance and the promise of justice, or revenge. In the distance, a coyote howled, and Sarah pulled Henry closer, wondering if she'd just been rescued or if she'd simply found a different kind of danger in the shape of the mysterious man who rode beside them, his dark coat billowing behind him like wings. The desert had teeth, and they were closing in. 3 days out from Copper Creek, their water was running low. The horses moved with their heads hanging, foam flecking their mouths despite Jake's careful rationing. Sarah's lips were cracked and bleeding, and Henry had stopped asking when they would rest. The boy swayed in the saddle, held upright only by his mother's arms. Jake Morrison studied the horizon, reading signs in the landscape that Sarah couldn't begin to decipher. They'd left the established trails 2 days ago, heading into Apache territory where few white men dared venture. Behind them, dust clouds marked their pursuers, Iron Jack Morrison's gang. 5 riders who'd been dogging their trail since dawn. There, Jake pointed to a line of cottonwoods in the distance, their green a miracle against the burnt landscape. "Water, but we'll have company." Sarah's heart sank. More of Morrison's men. "Apache." Jake's voice was flat. "This is their land. We're trespassing." As they descended into the canyon where the cottonwoods grew, Sarah saw them, warriors materializing from the rocks like ghosts. They surrounded the small spring, weapons ready, faces painted for war. At their head stood a man who commanded attention without effort, tall and lean, with silver threading through long black hair. He watched their approach with eyes that missed nothing. Jake raised his hand in greeting, speaking in a language Sarah didn't understand. The Apache leader responded, his voice carrying the authority of mountains and storms. The exchange was brief, ending with Jake slowly dismounting and approaching on foot. "Stay on your horse," he told Sarah quietly. "No sudden movements." The Apache leader, Sarah heard Jake address him as Del Shay, studied the newcomers with undisguised suspicion. His gaze lingered on Sarah and Henry, and something shifted in his expression. Not softness. These were not soft men, but perhaps memory. More words were exchanged. Jake gestured back toward their trail, and Del Shay's expression darkened. He barked orders to his warriors, who melted back into the rocks as quickly as they'd appeared, save for two who remained flanking their leader. "He'll let us water the horses," Jake said, returning to Sarah's side. "But we can't stay. Those men following us are his problem now. This is Apache land, but he won't shelter us. He's made that clear." As they led the horses to the spring, Sarah noticed how Del Shay watched Henry. The boy, despite his exhaustion, stared back with the fearless curiosity of childhood. When Henry raised his small hand in a wave, something that might have been amusement flickered across the warrior's face. The horses had barely finished drinking when gunfire erupted from the canyon rim. Jake shoved Sarah and Henry behind a boulder as bullets whined overhead. The two Apache warriors had vanished, but Del Shay remained by the spring, standing exposed as if the bullets were no more than annoying flies. "The fool," Jake muttered, checking his rifle. "He's drawing their fire." Iron Jack Morrison's gang had found them, but they'd also found something else. An Apache war party that materialized from the canyon walls like deadly flowers blooming. The outlaws, caught in the open, didn't last long. Sarah covered Henry's ears as the sounds of battle echoed off the rocks, trying not to think about what those sounds meant. When silence fell, thick as wool, only two of Morrison's men remained alive. Iron Jack himself and a rat-faced gunman named Slade. They knelt in the dust, hands bound, surrounded by Apache warriors whose faces promised no mercy. Del Shay approached the prisoners, speaking in accented but clear English. "You chased these people across Apache land. Why?" Iron Jack spat blood. "None of your business. Savage." The warrior beside Del Shay moved faster than Sarah's eyes could follow. Iron Jack screamed as a knife point traced a line across his cheek. "Everything on this land is my business," Del Shay said calmly. "Answer, or my brother will continue his artwork." Slade broke first. "The woman, she's got papers, evidence about a land swindle. Our boss needs her dead, and the papers destroyed." "Your boss?" "Judge Thornton, down in Tucson. He's been buying up Apache land grants with forged documents. The woman's husband found out, gathered proof. We killed him, but she ran with the evidence." Del Shay's face might have been carved from stone. He turned to Jake. "This is true." Jake nodded. "William McKenna died trying to stop them from stealing more of your people's land." For a long moment, Del Shay studied Sarah. She met his gaze steadily, one hand on Henry's shoulder. Then he turned back to the prisoners. "You kill for men who steal Apache land?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "This judge, he sends soldiers when we resist. Yes, as we break treaties we never signed." Iron Jack's face had gone gray. He knew what was coming. Del Shay spoke rapidly in Apache. The warriors moved forward, and Sarah turned Henry's face into her skirts as justice or vengeance was delivered. The screams didn't last long. When it was over, Del Shay stood before them, blood on his hands but none on his conscience. "You carry proof of this land theft." Sarah found her voice. "Yes, documents, contracts, evidence of forgery. My husband died protecting it." "Show me," with trembling fingers. Sarah retrieved the oilcloth packet. Del Shay examined the papers, his face growing darker with each page. Finally, he looked up. "Your husband was a fool to die for papers. But perhaps," he studied Henry, who had emerged from his mother's skirts to stare with solemn eyes. Perhaps there are different kinds of warriors. He handed the packet back.
You cannot reach Tucson alive. Thornton has too many men, too many watchers. You come with us.
Jake stepped forward. Now wait a minute. You brought them to Apache land. Delche cut him off. Now they are my responsibility. Unless you prefer, I send you away. And they die within the day.
Sarah's legs nearly buckled with relief. Shelter, safety, even temporary. We're grateful.
Do not be grateful yet. Delche's eyes were hard as flint. My people have no love for whites. You will earn your place or you will leave. But your son... He looked at Henry again. He has courage. Perhaps he can learn our ways, become something more than what his blood makes him. As they prepared to leave with the Apache band, Jake drew Sarah aside. This isn't what I planned. Delche's a good man, but his people have suffered. They won't welcome you. Do we have a choice? Jake looked back at their trail, where buzzards were already circling. No, but Sarah. He hesitated, then continued. I'll stay close as long as I can. There's more to this than just the land scheme. Thornton has connections all the way to Washington. Your evidence could bring down more than just him. As they rode out with the Apache, Sarah felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. She was taking her son into a world where they would be outsiders, barely tolerated at best. But when she looked at Henry, sitting straight in his saddle, trying to imitate the proud bearing of the Apache warriors, she saw possibility. The sun was setting as they climbed out of the canyon, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Behind them lay the bodies of men who'd hunted them. Ahead lay an uncertain future among people who had every reason to hate them. But they were alive. And sometimes, Sarah thought as she watched Delche ride at the head of his band, that was enough. The papers hidden in her dress might bring justice, or they might bring more death. For now, they had water, food, and the protection of a man whose own losses had carved him into something as hard and unforgiving as the desert itself. Henry's voice piped up, trying out a word he'd heard the warriors use. His pronunciation was terrible, but one of the younger Apaches smiled and corrected him gently. Perhaps, Sarah thought, there was hope after all. The canyon was a death trap waiting to be sprung. Delche had chosen the battleground with the patience of a master chess player. The narrow passage through red rock walls offered only one way in and one way out. Above, his warriors crouched among the boulders like mountain cats, invisible until they chose to strike. Sarah pressed herself against the canyon wall. Henry clutched tight against her chest. Jake Morrison lay prone beside them, his rifle trained on the canyon mouth. 3 days had passed since they joined Delche's band, and already Iron Jack Morrison's replacement had found them, a man named Cole Brennan, leading 20 hired guns. Your friend Thornton doesn't give up easy, Jake muttered. Delche appeared beside them, moving with a silence that still unnerved Sarah. They come. Many horses, many guns. But the rocks are our allies here. The first riders appeared at the canyon entrance, moving cautiously. Sarah recognized the type-hard men who killed for gold and slept sound afterward. They knew they were riding into Apache territory. But 20 guns made them bold. Delche raised his hand. The canyon held its breath. The lead rider, a scarred man wearing a Union cavalry jacket, held up a white flag. We want the woman and the boy. He called out, send them out, and we ride away. No need for bloodshed. Delche's laugh was soft and dangerous. You come to Apache land, threaten Apache guests, and speak of avoiding blood. Your blood was forfeit the moment you crossed into these mountains. 60 seconds, the scarred man replied. Then we're coming in. Delche melted back into the rocks. Sarah counted heartbeats, each one loud as thunder in her ears. Henry whispered, Mama, I'm scared. Hush, brave heart. Be still as a rabbit. The 60 seconds passed like 60 years. The riders spurred forward, flooding into the canyon in a thunder of hooves. They'd made it perhaps 50 yards when the world exploded. Apache rifles spoke from the heights, each shot deliberate and deadly. Men tumbled from saddles. Horses screamed and reared. Adding to the chaos, the invaders fired blindly at the canyon walls, their bullets sparking harmlessly off ancient stone. But these weren't raw cowboys. The survivors quickly dismounted, using their fallen horses as cover, returning fire with discipline. The scarred leader barked orders, organizing a fighting retreat. That's when the second part of Delshay's trap revealed itself. Warriors materialized at the canyon entrance, sealing it like a cork in a bottle. Caught between two forces, the hired guns fought with desperate fury. The narrow canyon became a cauldron of sound, gunfire, war cries, the screams of dying men. Sarah saw Jake rise up, his rifle cracking steadily. Each shot found its mark, dropping men who tried to rush their position. His face was calm, almost peaceful, as if he'd found his purpose in this violence. A figure broke from the melee, running toward their hiding spot. One of Brennan's men, wild-eyed with panic, had spotted Sarah. He raised his pistol, and time seemed to slow. Henry moved faster than thought. The boy snatched up a fist-sized rock and hurled it with all his 8-year-old strength. It caught the gunman in the temple, staggering him long enough for an Apache arrow to finish what Henry had started. Delshay witnessed it all. Something shifted in his expression as he looked at the boy. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. The battle was turning into a slaughter. Cole Brennan and 6 survivors had formed a defensive circle in the canyon's center, but their ammunition was running low. Above them, Apache warriors moved along the rim like shadows, picking their shots. "Enough!" Brennan shouted, his voice cracking. "We surrender." Delshay appeared on a boulder above them, magnificent and terrible in his war paint. "You came here to kill a woman and child. Apache do not accept surrender from such men." "Please," one of the gunmen begged, throwing down his weapon. "We were just following orders. It's nothing personal." "Nothing personal," Delshay's voice was ice. "You make war on children and call it nothing personal." The end came quickly. Sarah turned Henry's face away, but she forced herself to watch. These men had hunted them, would have killed them without mercy. Their deaths were justice, even if it was the harsh justice of the desert. When the last echo faded, the canyon fell silent except for the whisper of wind through stone. 23 men had ridden in. None would ride out. Delshay's warriors moved among the fallen, collecting weapons and ammunition. The Apache had lost 2 men, with 3 more wounded. By any measure, it was a victory. But Delshay's face showed no celebration. He approached Sarah and Henry. Blood spattered across his chest. "Your boy has warrior spirit." He acted while grown men hesitated. Henry stood straighter, trying not to show how his hands shook. "I didn't want them to hurt my mama." "Fear for others makes us brave," Delshay said. "Fear for ourselves makes us cowards. You understand the difference. Not all men do." Jake joined them, reloading his rifle. "Thornton will send more soldiers next time. Probably. He can't afford to let that evidence reach the federal marshals." "Let them come," Delshay said. "These mountains have swallowed armies before." He looked at Sarah. "But you bring danger to my people. Some say I should kill you. Take the papers myself." Sarah's chin lifted. "Then why don't you—" "Because your husband died trying to protect Apache land. Because your son shows courage. Because—" He paused, looking into the distance. "Because I once had a wife who stood as you do, unafraid even when afraid. The soldiers killed her for the crime of being Apache." The admission hung between them like a bridge across a chasm. "I'm sorry," Sarah said simply. "Sorrow changes nothing, but perhaps justice can." Delshay turned to his warriors, speaking in rapid Apache. Then, to Sarah, "We return to camp. You have earned your place among us today. Both of you." As they prepared the horses, Jake pulled Sarah aside. That was close. Too close. We need to get you to Tucson soon. Del Shay's right. They'll be watching every trail. Maybe, but staying here makes the Apache targets. How long before Thornton convinces the army that Del Shay's band is harboring fugitives? Sarah looked at Henry, who was helping an Apache warrior calm a skittish horse. The boy moved with new confidence, as if the violence had burned away some of his childhood fear. "A few more days," she said. "Let them think we died here. Let Thornton believe his men succeeded." Jake nodded slowly. "Might work, if we can slip away quiet-like while they're celebrating." He paused. "That was a brave thing your boy did." "Too brave. He's 8 years old. He shouldn't have to be. Out here, children grow up fast or they don't grow up at all." The truth of it sat heavy on her heart as they rode out of the canyon. Behind them, the buzzards were already gathering, nature's cleanup crew arriving for the feast. The red rocks were painted redder now, and Sarah wondered if the stain would ever truly fade. Del Shay rode beside them as they climbed toward the hidden camp. "Your enemies are strong," he said. "They have money, influence, soldiers. My people have only these mountains and our knowledge of them." "And your courage," Sarah added. "Courage fills no bellies when winter comes. Your papers, they could truly stop the land stealing." "My husband believed so. He died believing it." Del Shay was quiet for a long moment. Then perhaps his death was not foolish. A man should die for something greater than himself. As they crested the ridge, the Apache camp spread before them, wickiups blending into the landscape, nearly invisible until you were upon them. Women and children emerged to witness their return, to count the living and mourn the dead. Sarah saw the looks they gave her, suspicious, hostile, grieving. She was the cause of their losses, the white woman who'd brought death to their door. But when they saw Henry riding proud beside the warriors, something in their expressions shifted. Not acceptance, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. The bloodshed in the canyon had bought them time, but at a cost measured in lives. As Sarah dismounted, she felt the weight of those deaths settling on her shoulders alongside the precious papers. Justice demanded its price in the desert. She was learning that lesson well. 3 weeks passed like the turning of seasons. The Apache camp had settled into an uneasy routine that included its 2 white guests. Sarah woke each dawn to the sound of women preparing the morning meal, the scrape of stone on corn, the crackle of cook fires coming to life. The wickiup she shared with Henry smelled of smoke and sage, familiar now as her own skin. Henry had transformed. The frightened boy who'd clung to her skirts was gone, replaced by a small warrior in training who moved through the camp with growing confidence. His skin had darkened under the desert sun, and his blonde hair now hung in 2 braids, Apache style. This morning, Sarah found him with Naichi, Del Shay's nephew, practicing with a child's bow. The Apache boy, perhaps 2 years older than Henry, demonstrated the proper draw, speaking in a mixture of Apache and broken English. No, Naichi corrected. "Elbow here, like wing of hawk." Henry adjusted his stance, drew the small bow, and released. The arrow flew straighter this time, though it still missed the bundle of grass they'd set as a target. "Better," Naichi grinned. "Tomorrow we hunt rabbits." "Real hunting?" Henry's eyes went wide. Sarah started to protest, then caught herself. This was their world now, at least for the moment. Coddling Henry would mark them both as weak. "Morning, Sarah." Jake appeared beside her, coffee in hand. He'd taken to dressing more like the Apache practical leather instead of his black coat, though he still wore his guns like a white man. "He's adapting faster than I am," Sarah admitted, watching Henry knock another arrow. "Children do. It's harder for us to shed our old selves." Jake studied her with those dark eyes. "The women still giving you trouble?" Sarah touched the fresh scratch on her arm. Courtesy of Itza, Del Shay's sister, who'd accidentally caught her with a basket edge that morning. "Some," They blame me for the warriors who died in the canyon. They're not wrong to. The blunt words stung, but Sarah nodded. I know, but I can't change what's happened. I can only try to prove I'm worth the cost. That afternoon, Sarah joined the women gathering mesquite beans. It was hard work under the brutal sun, filling baskets with the sweet pods that would be ground into flour. Her hands, once soft, were now calloused and capable, though she still moved clumsily compared to the Apache women. Ayana, one of the younger women who'd lost her husband in the canyon fight, worked beside her in silence. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke. Your boy, he learns quickly. Sarah straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. Naichi is a good teacher. My husband had no sons, only daughters. Ayana's voice was steady, but Sarah heard the grief beneath. He would have liked to teach a boy to hunt. I'm sorry, Sarah said, knowing how inadequate the words were. Ayana studied her with eyes old beyond her years. Delche says you carry papers that could help our people keep their land. Is this true? My husband believed so. He died trying to protect evidence that white men, powerful men, have been stealing Apache lands through forged documents. Papers. Ayana spat the word. White men's magic. Marks on paper that say this land is theirs, not ours, though we have walked it since before the stones were young. She bent back to her gathering. But if white man's magic can be turned against them. That evening, Sarah witnessed something that would stay with her forever. The warriors had returned from a hunt, bringing deer. As was custom, the meat would be distributed according to need. Elders and children first. Henry sat with the Apache boys, trying to follow their rapid conversation. When his portion came, he did something that made the entire camp fall silent. He took his meat to old Nana, the eldest woman in camp, and offered it to her first. The old woman's weathered face cracked into a smile. She took a small piece, then pushed the rest back to Henry, speaking in Apache. Naichi translated. She says you have learned the most important lesson. The strong provide for those who cannot provide for themselves. Delche watched this exchange from across the fire. Sarah saw something shift in his expression. Walls crumbling just a little more. Later, as the camp settled for sleep, Jake found Sarah by the dying fire. We need to talk about leaving. Sarah's stomach clenched. Already? It's been 3 weeks. Thornton will have sent scouts to confirm his men succeeded. When no bodies turn up, he'll know you're alive. Every day we stay puts these people at risk. Where would we go? You said yourself they're watching every trail to Tucson. There's another way. A federal marshal named Sam Edison operates out of Prescott. It's farther, but Thornton won't expect it. I can get word to him. Arrange a meeting. Sarah looked around the camp that had become, against all odds, something like home. When? Soon. Maybe another week to prepare. Jake paused. There's something else. Delche's been asking questions about the documents. I think he wants to go with us, present the evidence himself. That's dangerous for him, a known Apache warrior in a white town. He knows, but this is about more than just your husband's murder now. It's about his people's survival. That night, Sarah lay awake listening to Henry's peaceful breathing. Her son muttered something in his sleep, Apache words mixed with English. He was becoming something new. Neither fully white nor Apache, but perhaps stronger for it. A shadow fell across the Wickiup entrance. Delche stood there, his face unreadable in the moonlight. Walk with me, he said quietly. Sarah glanced at Henry, then followed Delche out into the desert night. They walked in silence until the camp was just a collection of shadows behind them. Your boy, Delche finally said. He has found his place among us. The warriors speak of making him Apache when he comes of age. A ceremony of adoption. Sarah's heart clenched with an emotion she couldn't name. Pride, fear. He would be honored. And have you found your place? The question hung between them like a challenge. Sarah thought of her scratched arms, her aching back, the suspicious looks that still followed her.
I'm trying. Your people have every reason to hate me.
Hate is easy. Trust is hard. Delche looked up at the stars. My wife trusted too easily. She believed the soldiers when they said they came in peace. They killed her while I was hunting. Her and our daughter. They were gathering berries. Like you gathered mesquite beans today.
Sarah remained silent, understanding that this confession was a gift not lightly given.
I swore I would never show mercy to whites again. Never trust, never forgive. He turned to her. Your boy makes liars of our oaths. He shows us that blood does not determine the heart. Henry has always been special, too gentle for the world we lived in. I worried it would get him killed. Gentleness and strength are not enemies. The mountain is strong, but wildflowers grow in its cracks. Delche started back toward camp. Jake Morrison speaks of leaving soon, of taking the papers to white man's law. Yes, I will go with you. My warriors will see you safe to this marshal, and I will speak your truth to him. Tell him what these stolen lands mean to my people.
Delche, you don't have to.
I do, for my wife, for my daughter, for all the ghosts that walk these mountains. Perhaps your papers can succeed where our arrows have failed. As they neared the camp, Sarah asked, What changed your mind about us? Delche paused. Today, your boy shared his meat with Nana. A small thing, but the small things show us who we are. He thought like Apache, acted like Apache. If a white child can learn this, perhaps there is hope. Hope for what? For a world where my people are not ghosts in our own land, where papers protect instead of steal, where, he gestured toward the wickiup where Henry slept, where children like yours can belong to both worlds without being torn apart. They parted without another word, but Sarah felt the weight of what had passed between them. Trust, fragile as a bird's egg, had been offered. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. She'd found acceptance among people her own kind called savages, while civilized men hunted her like an animal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The journey to Prescott would be dangerous, and there was no guarantee Marshal Edison would believe them or act on their evidence. But tonight, under the vast umbrella of desert stars, Sarah McKenna allowed herself to hope. Henry had found his place. Perhaps, in time, she would find hers. The discovery came from an unlikely source. Itza, Delche's sister, who had tormented Sarah for weeks, burst into their wickiup just after dawn, her usual hostility replaced by urgency. White woman, come now. Sarah scrambled from her blankets, Henry stirring beside her.
What's wrong?
My son returns from scouting. You need to hear. In the center of camp, a young warrior named Kohana sat drinking water while the elders gathered. His face was grave, dust caked from hard riding. Delche gestured for Sarah to join the circle, an honor that didn't go unnoticed. Kohana spoke in rapid Apache, his words causing ripples of alarm through the gathered crowd. Delche's face darkened with each sentence. What is it? Sarah asked Jake, who'd appeared at her elbow. Trouble, big trouble. Delche raised his hand for silence, then turned to Sarah. The railroad camp, 2 days north. My scout says they build more than rails. They prepare for war. War. Sarah's blood ran cold. Kohana switched to English, addressing her directly. 300 soldiers, not regular army-hired guns wearing blue. They have wagons of rifles, ammunition. They speak of attacking Apache camps, clearing the land for the railroad. Jake cursed under his breath. Thornton, he's not waiting anymore. He'll wipe out the Apache and blame it on uprising. When Delche's voice was deadly calm. New moon, 5 days. Kohana drank more water. I heard the officers talking. They have maps, marked with our camps. This one, too. The implications crashed over Sarah like a cold wave. Her presence here hadn't just brought danger. It had provided Thornton with the excuse he needed for genocide. "This is my fault," she breathed. "No." Delshay's voice cut sharp. "Thornton planned this before you came. You are the excuse, not the reason." He stood, addressing his people in Apache, then English. "We must warn the other camps. Prepare to fight or flee." "Wait." Sarah stood as well, her mind racing. "The documents I carry, they prove Thornton's land fraud. But what if there's more? What if the railroad camp has papers showing this planned attack is illegal?" Itza scoffed. "You would walk into enemy camp for papers." "Not walk," Sarah said, meeting her hostile gaze. "If these soldiers are planning to murder innocents on Thornton's orders, there must be written commands, evidence. Without it, even my documents might not be enough." Delshay studied her. "You would risk this." "Your people risked everything to shelter us. I won't let that debt go unpaid." Jake shook his head. "It's suicide. A white woman in a military camp." "Not a white woman," Sarah said quietly. "A laundress, maybe, or a camp follower. They won't look twice if I play the part." "Mama, no." Henry had emerged from the wiki-up, his face stricken. "You can't leave us." Sarah knelt, taking his shoulders. "Braveheart, listen, these bad men want to hurt our friends. Hurt Naichi and Ayayana and Grandfather Delshay. Should I let that happen?" Henry's lips trembled, but his spine straightened. "I'll come with you." "No, you'll stay here. Help prepare the camp. Can you do that?" "Be strong." The boy nodded, fighting tears. In that moment, Sarah saw the man he would become if they survived. The debate raged for hours. Warriors argued for immediate attack, others for retreat. Finally, Delshay made his decision. Sarah will go to the railroad camp with Kohana as guide. Jake Morrison and 3 warriors will shadow them. If she finds proof of Thornton's plans, we'll use white man's law against him. If she fails. He didn't finish. That night, the camp prepared for 2 possibilities: legal salvation or bloody war. Sarah watched the warriors oil their weapons. The women pack essentials for quick flight. Henry worked beside Naichi, rolling bandages with steady hands. Ayana approached with a bundle. "Here." Sarah unwrapped it to find a worn dress, the kind frontier laundresses wore. "Thank you." "My sister was taken to such camps when she was young. She escaped, but not." Ayana's meaning was clear. "Be careful, white woman. Some fates are worse than death." As the sun set, Delshay found Sarah by the horse corral. "You know what you risk?" "Yes." "I have misjudged you. Sarah McKenna, I thought you weak, using tears and fear as weapons, but you have iron in your spine. Fear can exist alongside courage," Sarah said. "I'm terrified, but that won't stop me." "My wife said similar words once." Delshay's voice was distant. "She faced the soldiers who came to our camp, tried to reason with them, protect our daughter. Her courage was not enough. This time will be different. Perhaps, or perhaps we all join the ghosts tomorrow." He handed her a small leather pouch, Apache war medicine, for protection. Sarah tied it around her neck, tucked beneath her collar. "If something happens to me, Henry will be my son, as surely as if he were born Apache. This I swear." The oath hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt tears threaten and blinked them away. That night, unable to sleep, she found Jake cleaning his weapons by the dying fire. "Foolish thing you're doing," he said without looking up. "Necessary thing. Same difference out here." He set down his rifle. "Why you could take Henry. Run tonight. Reach Mexico before anyone knew you were gone." Sarah sat beside him. "Could you leave these people to die?" "I'm not a good man. Sarah, done things that would turn your stomach. But you..." He shook his head. "You still believe in justice." "My husband believed. He died for it. If I run now, His death means nothing. And if you die tomorrow, what does Henry's life mean then? The question pierced her heart. It means he was raised by people who stood for something, who didn't run when running was easier. Jake finally met her eyes. Then I'll keep you alive tomorrow, not for justice or Apache or any noble cause, because that boy deserves his mother. Jake, get some sleep. Dawn comes early, and that camp won't infiltrate itself. Sarah returned to her wiki-up, where Henry lay pretending to sleep. She curled around him, memorizing his warmth, his small boy smell, the way his hair stuck up at odd angles.
I'll come back,
she whispered.
I promise.
Mama, his voice was small in the darkness. Are you a warrior now like father was? Sarah thought of William, dead in the dust for papers and principles. I'm trying to be good, Henry murmured, already drifting back to sleep. Warriors protect people. That's what Nietzsche says. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the desert. Sarah listened to their wild songs and thought about transformation, how the desperate flight from Copper Creek had led her here, to this moment of choice. Tomorrow she would walk into the enemy's camp, seeking evidence that might save the people who'd sheltered her. She might find it, or she might find death. But tonight, holding her son in a wiki-up that smelled of sage and home, Sarah McKenna knew she'd already been transformed. The frightened widow was gone. In her place stood something harder, forged in desert heat and tempered by loss. Not Apache, not fully white anymore, but something in between, something that could face tomorrow without flinching. The war medicine pouch pressed warm against her chest. Over her heart were the precious documents still hid. Two kinds of power, ancient and modern, spirit and law. Tomorrow would tell which proved stronger. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's last thought was a prayer to whatever gods watched over fools and mothers. Let me be enough. Let courage be enough. The coyotes sang her to sleep, their voices carrying across the desert like prophecies of blood and redemption. The railroad camp sprawled across the desert like a festering wound, all canvas and corruption under the pre-dawn stars. Sarah crouched behind a cluster of rocks with Kohana, studying the layout while Jake and 3 Apache warriors kept watch from the ridge above. Many guards. Kohana whispered, more than normal for railroad building. Sarah had transformed herself completely. The worn dress Ayanna had given her hung loose on her frame. Dirt carefully rubbed into her face and hands. She'd even cut her hair shorter, ragged, like a woman who'd fallen on hard times. The command tent. She pointed to a larger structure near the center. That's where any orders would be kept. You cannot simply walk there. The guards won't stop a laundress reporting for work. Sarah hefted the bundle of rags she'd prepared. Camp followers are invisible to soldiers. They see what they expect to see. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Sarah made her move. She walked openly toward the camp, shoulders hunched, shuffling like someone who'd walked too many miles. Her heart hammered, but her steps remained steady. You there, Halt. A sentry, barely older than Henry, pointed his rifle at her. Sarah cringed appropriately. Please, sir, I'm looking for work. Heard the railroad camp needed washing done. She affected a slight Irish accent, something she'd heard in the frontier towns. The boy lowered his rifle slightly. Laundresses report to Sergeant Muller. Mess tent. Bless you, sir. Bless you. Sarah shuffled into the camp, every nerve screaming danger. Soldiers were already stirring, the early shift preparing for the day. She counted rifles, noted ammunition wagons, memorized guard positions. Kohana was right. This was no railroad camp. This was an army preparing for war. The mess tent reeked of burnt coffee and unwashed men. Sarah found Sergeant Muller, a thick-necked German who barely glanced at her. You wash, you get food, no pay until week's end. Sleep with the men, that's your business. But no trouble. He pointed to a pile of filthy uniforms. Start there. Sarah bent to the work. Just another invisible woman in a camp full of them. But her ears were sharp, catching conversations as soldiers moved past. Orders come down yet? Tonight, Briggs said, "Colonel wants us ready to move at dawn after next." About time. Been sitting here so long I forgot what we came for. Clearing out Apache nests ain't something you forget. Not after what they did to Captain Richardson's unit. Sarah's hands stilled. Captain Richardson's unit had been ambushed while trying to force Apache families from their homes. The warriors had shown no mercy to men who made war on women and children. These soldiers wanted revenge. As the day wore on, Sarah worked her way closer to the command tent. The other laundresses, hard women aged beyond their years, paid her no mind. Just another soul broken by the frontier. Her chance came near dusk. The colonel, a sharp-faced man named Ashford, summoned his officers for a briefing. Sarah grabbed an armload of clean uniforms and headed for the command tent. Just another servant doing her job. The guards didn't even look at her as she slipped inside. The tent's interior was spartanly furnished. A table covered with maps, a desk with papers, several chairs. Sarah's eyes went immediately to the desk. There, a leather portfolio marked with Thornton's seal. Voices approached. Sarah dropped behind a canvas partition, pressing herself flat as officers filed in. "Gentlemen," Colonel Ashford's voice was crisp. "Final orders have arrived. We move in 2 nights. Primary targets are the 3 camps marked on your maps. No survivors. Make it look like intertribal warfare." "Sir," one officer ventured, "women and children. Apache breed more Apache. Nits make lice. Captain." Sarah bit her knuckle to keep from gasping. They weren't planning a battle. They were planning slaughter. "What about the federal marshals if word gets out?" "It won't. Judge Thornton has assurances from Washington. The official report will show Apache attacked railroad workers. We responded with appropriate force." Ashford's laugh was cold. "The beauty is, once the Apache are gone, all that land becomes available for development. The judge has buyers lined up." The briefing continued for an hour. Sarah memorized every word, every detail of their monstrous plan. When the officers finally filed out, she waited, counting to 100. The portfolio sat unguarded on the desk. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it. Orders signed and sealed. Maps with Apache camps circled in red. Letters from Thornton discussing payment for services rendered. Everything she needed, but taking it would be noticed immediately. Sarah made her choice. She pulled out the most damning documents: direct orders for massacre, payment authorizations. Thornton's letter explicitly mentioning the murder of federal witnesses. The rest she left, rearranging to hide the theft. Footsteps outside. Sarah stuffed the papers into her bodice alongside her husband's documents and grabbed the uniforms. A guard entered just as she was straightening up. "What are you doing here?" "Uniforms, sir, for the colonel." Sarah kept her eyes down. Servile. The guard grunted, "Get out. Command tent's off limits after dark." Sarah scurried out, fighting the urge to run. She made her way to the laundress area, where women were settling for the night. Now came the hardest part, waiting until the camp slept. Near midnight, she made her move. The sentries were predictable, walking patterns she'd memorized throughout the day. Sarah slipped between tents like a ghost, the desert teaching her silence. She was almost clear when a hand grabbed her shoulder. Well, what's this?" The soldier spun her around, his breath sour with whiskey. "Little mouse out for a midnight stroll." Sarah's hand found the knife hidden in her skirts. Jake's parting gift. "Please, sir, I was just nothing." His grip tightened. "Guards might be interested in a sneaking woman, unless you'd rather be friendly-like." The knife went in smooth between his ribs, angled up like Jake had taught her. The soldier's eyes went wide, a gurgle escaping his throat. Sarah held him as he died, lowering him gently to the ground. Her first kill. She waited for the horror, the guilt, but all she felt was cold necessity. This man would have raised the alarm, doomed the Apache to slaughter, his life against hundreds. Sarah dragged the body behind a supply wagon and ran. Kohana materialized from the darkness at their rendezvous point. His eyes took in the blood on her dress, the papers clutched to her chest. "You have them." "Everything. We need to ride, now." They ran for the horses, Jake and the warriors falling in beside them. As they galloped into the desert night, Sarah heard shouts rising from the camp. The body had been found. "They'll come after us," Jake called out. "Let them come." One of the warriors snarled. "They'll find only death in these mountains." But Sarah knew better. They'd bought evidence with blood, her husband's, the warriors who'd died protecting them, and now the soldier she'd killed with her own hand. Each death added weight to the papers pressed against her heart. As they rode toward the Apache camp, racing against time and retribution, Sarah thought about transformation. She'd entered that camp as a frightened woman playing a role. She left as something else entirely. A killer, a spy, a mother who'd do anything to protect the innocent. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant as gods. Somewhere behind them, 300 soldiers prepared for massacre. Ahead lay desperate hope that papers and laws might stop what guns and hatred had set in motion. Sarah McKenna gripped the reins tighter and rode toward whatever dawn would bring. The blood on her hands had dried, but she felt its weight still. First blood was always the hardest. Jake had warned her. He was wrong. The hardest part was knowing she'd spill more before this was over. The Apache camp appeared before them, cook fires like fallen stars. As they thundered in, Sarah saw Henry running toward them, Delche beside him. Her son was safe. For now. But in 2 nights, death would come calling for them all. Unless paper proved mightier than lead. Dawn broke red as blood across the desert sky. The Apache camp had transformed into a fortress of desperate preparation. Warriors painted for death. Women packed what could be carried. Children too young to understand played between the frantic adults. But there would be no running this time. Delche stood at the center of it all, magnificent in his war regalia. The council had spoken through the night, weighing Sarah's stolen evidence against 300 rifles. The choice was made. They would stand and fight. "We cannot outrun mounted soldiers forever." Delche had declared, "Better to die as warriors than be hunted down like rabbits." Now, as the war party assembled, Sarah saw Henry among them. Her son, barely 9, wore war paint across his young face, a bow clutched in hands that should have been playing with toys. "No," she breathed, starting toward him. Jake caught her arm. "Don't. He earned his place. Take it from him now, and you shame him before warriors who've accepted him as one of their own. He's a child." "Not anymore." Jake's voice was gentle but firm. "None of us are what we were before this started." The evidence Sarah had risked everything to steal lay secure in Delche's tent. Riders had gone out before dawn, carrying copies to every federal marshal within 100 miles, but help wouldn't come in time. They all knew it. "The Canyon of the Weeping Rocks," Delche addressed his warriors. "That is where we make our stand. The ancestors fought there against Spanish soldiers. Their bones will welcome ours if we fall." Sarah found herself assigned to the group protecting women and children who couldn't fight. It burned her pride, but she understood. Her part in this battle was done. Now came the warriors' turn. As they moved toward the canyon, Ayana walked beside her. The Apache woman had barely spoken to her since that first day. But now she said, "Your son fights with my nephew. If they die as brothers." "They won't die," Sarah said fiercely. "I won't let them." Ayana's smile was sad. "White woman's magic thinking words can change what is coming. But I'm glad you are here. My husband's spirit can rest knowing his death brought allies, even unlikely ones." The Canyon of Weeping Rocks lived up to its name. Water seeped from the stone walls, creating an eternal tears that had carved channels in the ancient rock. The main force of warriors took position at the canyon's narrow mouth, while others scaled the walls to rain death from above. Sarah helped organize the defensive position for non-combatants deeper in the canyon. Her hands stayed busy, but her eyes never left the small figure of Henry, standing proud between Naichi and the other young warriors. Mama's watching again. Naichi teased, "You want her to sing you sleep songs." Henry's chin lifted. "I stopped needing sleep songs when I was 7. The lie made Sarah's heart break a little. Just last month he'd asked for the lullaby about mockingbirds. Now he stood ready to kill or die. Childhood burned away by necessity. Jake appeared, checking his ammunition. "When this starts, it'll be fast and brutal. These aren't hired guns anymore. They're soldiers who fought Indians before. They know the tricks. Will the evidence matter if we all die here? Maybe. Federal marshals don't like it when judges order massacres without proper authority. Might be enough to hang Thornton, even if we're not around to see it." He paused. "I put something in motion. Telegraphed a newspaperman I know in San Francisco. By tomorrow, this story will be on front pages from here to Washington. And us." Jake's smile was grim. "We'll be famous. Dead, most likely, but famous." The attack came at noon, when the sun turned the canyon into an oven. Colonel Ashford was no fool. He sent skirmishers first, testing the Apache defenses. Warriors fired carefully, making each shot count. Bodies began to pile at the canyon entrance, but more soldiers kept coming. Then came the cavalry charge, 50 mounted soldiers thundering toward the Apache positions. This was the moment of greatest danger. If they broke through, the canyon erupted. Warriors fired from concealed positions, their crossfire turning the charge into chaos. Horses screamed, men fell, dust and gun smoke creating a hellish fog. But momentum carried some through. Sarah watched in horror as a knot of soldiers penetrated the defenses, heading straight for the young warrior's position. Henry drew his small bow, face set in concentration. His arrow flew true, catching a soldier in the shoulder, spinning him from his horse. First blood. Her baby had drawn first blood. The breakthrough was contained, soldiers driven back, but the cost was visible. Apache bodies lay still among the rocks, and this was just the beginning. "Pull back," Delshay's voice carried over the battle. "Second position." The warriors retreated deeper into the canyon, drawing the soldiers after them. It was planned, but it felt like defeat. Sarah gathered children, herding them to the final defensive point where the canyon boxed into a dead end. Their backs were literally to the wall. The soldiers regrouped, advancing more carefully now. They'd learned respect for Apache marksmanship, using cover, coordinating their movements. Professional killers doing professional work. That's when the second part of Delshay's strategy revealed itself. Warriors who'd climbed out the back of the canyon during the night suddenly appeared on the rim above the advancing soldiers. Caught between two forces, the soldiers' disciplined advance crumbled into chaos. The fighting became hand-to-hand in places, Apache knives against army bayonets. Sarah saw Jake wade into a knot of soldiers who'd cornered two warriors, his pistols speaking death at close range. He moved like a force of nature, every shot deliberate, every movement calculated. But there were so many soldiers. For every one that fell, 2 more seemed to take his place. "They're flanking us!" someone shouted. A group of soldiers had found a goat path up the canyon wall. They'd be above the Apache positions in minutes, able to fire down on women and children. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed a fallen warrior's rifle and scrambled up the rocks. Others followed. Ayana, 2 elderly women who'd refused to be helpless. Even Itza. They met the soldiers halfway up the treacherous path. Sarah had never fired a rifle in battle before, but rage made her steady. These men had come to murder children. Her Henry, Naichi, little ones who'd done nothing but be born Apache. She fired, worked the lever, fired again. A soldier tumbled past her, his face a red ruin. Another tried to grab her rifle. Itza's knife found his kidney before he could. "Together," Ayana shouted. "As one." The women fought with desperate fury, holding the path against superior numbers. Sarah's world narrowed to load. Aim, fire, repeat. When the rifle ran empty, she used it as a club. Then, suddenly, the pressure eased. The soldiers were pulling back, retreating toward the canyon mouth. Horns sounded, not Apache war calls, but army bugles calling retreat. "What's happening?" Sarah gasped, her hands shaking as the battle fury drained away. From the canyon mouth came new sounds, more gunfire, but different. Disciplined volleys, followed by shouted commands. Jake appeared, bloodied but whole. "Cavalry, real cavalry, 2 companies, riding hard from Fort Huachuca." "How?" "Remember that newspaper man I mentioned? Turns out he has friends in the army who don't appreciate soldiers being used for private massacres." Jake's grin was wild. "Colonel Ashford is about to learn what happens when you take army uniforms without army permission." The battle wasn't over, but its nature had changed. Now Ashford's mercenaries found themselves caught between Apache warriors and legitimate Ute Terran, cavalry who'd come to arrest them for impersonating federal troops. Sarah stumbled down from the rocks, searching frantically for Henry. She found him with the young warriors, war paint streaked with tears he wouldn't acknowledge. Bo still clutched in trembling hands. "Mama," he whispered, and suddenly he was just her little boy again. She held him as the canyon filled with new sounds, officers shouting orders, weapons being surrendered, the rule of law asserting itself over the chaos of vendetta. But the cost was visible everywhere. Apache bodies cooling in the desert heat. Warriors who'd survived 100 battles, dead defending their families. Women who'd become warriors when warriors fell. Delche stood amid the carnage, still magnificent despite the blood on his hands. He met Sarah's eyes across the battlefield, and in that look was acknowledgement. Her stolen papers had brought the cavalry. Her courage had bought them time. The victory was Pyrrhic, paid for in precious lives. But they'd survived. The massacre had been prevented. And somewhere in San Francisco, newspapers were rolling with a story that would destroy Judge Thornton. As the sun set on the canyon of Weeping Rocks, it had new reasons for its name, but also, perhaps, reason for hope. White man's law had, for once, protected Apache lives. It wasn't justice. Not yet, but it was a beginning. The news came 3 days after the battle, carried by a dust-covered rider from Fort Huachuca. Judge Thornton was dead, found in his study with a pistol in his hand and his brains decorating the wall behind his desk. The coward had chosen his own end rather than face the gallows. Colonel Ashford and his surviving mercenaries were in custody, awaiting trial for treason, murder, and impersonating federal officers. Sarah stood at the edge of the Apache camp, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of copper and gold. The papers that had cost so much blood were no longer hers to protect. Federal marshals had taken them as evidence. Her part in this dark drama was ending. But what came next? "The agent says we can return to the reservation." Delche's voice came from behind her. "The new boundaries will respect our traditional lands. Your husband's papers prove the original treaty was forged." Sarah turned to face him. The Apache leader looked older than when they'd first met. Grief etched in new lines around his eyes. 23 warriors had died in the canyon, including Kohana, the young scout who'd guided her to the railroad camp. "Will you go? My people need a home where children can grow without fear, if papers and promises can give us that." He shrugged. "We have tried war. Perhaps we try peace." "You trust them after everything." Delche's smile was bitter. "I trust that the newspapers have made us famous. Hard to massacre folk heroes without consequences. Your newspaper friends saw to that." It was true. The story had exploded across the nation. Corrupt judge conspires to steal Indian lands. Brave widow risks everything to expose the truth. Apache warriors and UNS cavalry fight side by side against mercenary army. It was the kind of tale Americans loved, full of clearly drawn heroes and villains. "What will you do?" Delchay asked. "You are welcome among us, you and your son. He has earned his place with blood and courage." Sarah looked toward the camp where Henry was helping Nietzsche repair arrows. Her son moved with easy confidence among the Apache, speaking their language, sharing their work. He'd found a home here. "But there's family in St. Louis," Sarah said slowly. "William's sister. She wrote after he died, offering to take us in. Henry could go to school, have a normal life." "Normal." Delchay tasted the word. "Is that what he wants, or what you want for him?" The question cut deep. Sarah watched her son laugh at something Nietzsche said, saw the warrior he was becoming. Could she take him from this? Stuff him back into the box of civilized childhood? Jake Morrison made the decision easier. He found her that evening as she sat alone, wrestling with the future. "I'm heading to California," he said without preamble. "New name, new life. The newspapers made me too famous for comfort. Running away. Starting over, there's a difference." He studied her in the firelight. "You could come, you and Henry, make a fresh start where nobody knows your story." For a moment, Sarah let herself imagine it. A small house by the ocean, Henry in school, maybe a shop of her own. Peace. "I can't," she said finally. "Henry needs more than I can give him alone. He needs education, opportunities, things I can't provide on the run." Jake nodded, unsurprised. "The sister in St. Louis. It's what William would want, a chance for Henry to become more than—" She gestured helplessly at the desert, the camp, the life of constant danger they'd known. "More than what a warrior, a survivor, someone who stands for what's right even when it costs everything." Jake's voice was gentle. "Seems to me he's already become something pretty special." That night, Sarah told Henry about St. Louis. His reaction surprised her. "I know," he said simply. "Nietzsche told me you'd been crying. He said it's what mothers do when they have to choose hard things. Do you understand why?" Henry was quiet for a long moment. "Father wanted me to be educated, to read law books and wear city clothes and be respectable. But I don't think he knew about this." He gestured to the camp, the desert, the life they'd found. "I don't think he knew I could be both." "Both? Apache and white, warrior and scholar. Like you. Mama, you're a lady who can also fight. Why can't I be both things?" The wisdom of it stole her breath. When had her little boy become so wise? The leaving was harder than Sarah expected. Women who'd barely tolerated her at first now pressed gifts into her hands. Beaded moccasins for Henry, a blanket for cold nights, dried meat for the journey. Itza, who'd tormented her for so long, stood awkwardly before her. "You fought beside us. My brother would be dead without your warning. I was wrong about you." "We were both protecting our families," Sarah said. "I understand." Ayanna gave her a necklace of turquoise. "So you remember, not all battles are fought with guns. Some are fought with words on paper, with courage that looks like weakness. You taught us this." The hardest parting was Henry's. He and Nietzsche stood face to face, trying to be strong. Finally. Nietzsche pulled a small knife from his belt. "My father's," he said, "for my brother." Henry's eyes filled, but he didn't let the tears fall. "I'll come back. When I'm grown, I'll bring books and teach Apache children to read, so they can fight with papers too." "I will be here," Nietzsche promised. Delchay himself escorted them to the edge of Apache territory, where a cavalry detachment waited to see them safely to the railroad. As they prepared to part, the Apache leader took Sarah's hands. "Your husband died for justice. You killed for it. Your son bled for it. The debt between us is balanced." He paused. "But perhaps debts are not what matter. Perhaps what matters is that we found understanding in hatred's despite. Will it last, this peace?" "Nothing lasts, but for now, my people have hope. You gave us that." He looked at Henry, straight-backed on his horse. "And you gave us him. He will return. I think changed, educated, but still ours in part. Such bridges between worlds may be what saves us all." As they rode away, Sarah looked back once. Delchay stood on a ridge, silhouetted against the morning sky, watching them go. She raised her hand in farewell, and he did the same. St. Louis waited, with its schools and churches and proper society that would be scandalized by their story, but they carried the desert with them, in Henry's sun-darkened skin, in Sarah's calloused hands, in the steel that tragedy had forged in their spines. They were leaving as more than they'd arrived. A widow and orphan had fled into the desert. A woman who'd found her strength and a boy who'd found his courage were riding out. Behind them, the Apache would face an uncertain future, armed now with papers and promises instead of just arrows. Ahead, Henry would grow into the man he was meant to be, educated in white ways but carrying Apache wisdom in his heart. The railroad carried them east, away from the land of sun and stone that had transformed them. Sarah held Henry close as he pressed his face to the window, watching the desert fade into memory. "We'll go back," she promised, "when you're ready." "I know," Henry said, fingering Nietzsche's knife. "They're my people too now. Both peoples are." And in that simple statement lay perhaps the greatest victory of all. In a world torn by hatred and greed, a boy had learned to belong to both sides of a divide. He would grow up to be a bridge between worlds, carrying his father's passion for justice and his Apache brother's courage. The story that began with a desperate flight into danger ended with a journey toward hope. The widow who'd stood on an auction block had become a warrior. The frightened boy had become a young man of two peoples. And somewhere in the Arizona desert, an Apache leader stood watch over his people's future, knowing that understanding was possible, that enemies could become family, that sometimes the greatest courage was not in fighting but in trusting. The sun climbed higher, blessing the land with light, and the world turned on toward whatever tomorrow would bring. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West, where love and justice conquered hatred and greed. Where are you enjoying this story from? Share your location in the comments below so we can connect with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Sarah and Henry's journey. What touched your heart the most? We'd love to hear from you.